Chloe, thank you for grounding me because that traffic had me. It's like, Musa, breathe. But yeah, thank you for that grounding meditation. Definitely took me somewhere else and grounded me. And Evan, thank you for inviting me. The first time that Evan invited me to be a part of this was maybe a couple months ago when Chloe was out of town. I think you were traveling to New York, and Evan's like, can you fill in for Chloe? Can you just like guide a meditation? And I was just like, yeah, of course, like so fun. I'll totally do that. And then after that, he asked me, okay, so when is it's gonna be your turn to speak? And I'm like, huh? What are you talking about? Like, stand up here and share my story. And I'm just thinking, like, why? Like, I don't have to do that. But I sat with it. And you know, and he would bring it up once in a while, and then eventually I realized, like, it's time. It's time for me to share this story that has led me to being the person that I am today. And so I'm really grateful for those nudges. I mean, Chloe has also been a person who, you know, when I haven't felt ready, but she knows I'm ready because she could see, and she's like, go. And then you've also been that for me, and I really appreciate those stretches and these opportunities for me to continue to grow. So thank you again for having me. So for those of you who don't know me, again, my name is Emmy, also known as a Mindful OT on social media on Instagram, and I am the owner and creator of Yo.T Holistic Wellness, where we curate these multi-sensory experiences out in the community to provide an overall sense of well-being. And we do that through a variety of modalities, from yoga and mindfulness, meditation, energy healing, energy work through reiki, breath work, sound healing, and collaborating with different practitioners to really provide you with these ultimate, beautiful experiences. And so we have a variety of offerings from Broward County, in Broward County, from Plantation to Pompano. We have free of cost offerings that are totally free for you. You can bring your family, you can bring your friends, you can bring your whole tribe, and it's free. So we have that. Then we have lower ticketed items out in Pompano, and then higher ticketed items, but they're not so expensive. Like, for me, something that's really important is to make these offerings accessible and reasonably priced. And the reason for that is working in the healthcare system as an occupational therapist, and I used to work in the hospitals, I realized that healthcare isn't always, it could be accessible, but it doesn't mean that you're gonna get quality healthcare. You can have a doctor, but it doesn't mean that he's gonna be a really good doctor who's really invested in your health, or a very good clinician like a therapist, a clinical psychologist. There's so many clinical psychologists, but they don't always resonate. And so although I'm not offering here, I'm not a doctor, I'm not this or that, but what I am offering are these modalities that are so therapeutic. And I think that so many diseases could be avoided if we were more in tune with our bodies, if we were more in tune of like what is serving us, whether it's the food that we're consuming or the thoughts that we're feeding ourselves or the environments that we're placing ourselves in. So for me, that is why I do what I do, and that is why I like to keep it reasonably priced, because I know of the power behind these modalities. In order for you to understand why this is so important and why I really stand behind all these practices, the yoga, the mindfulness, the meditation, all these things, I think it's important for you to also know my story. And I've shared bits and pieces of my story, but I haven't really shared as raw as I will today. And I have my, brought my tissue paper just in case, because it is a vulnerable story, and it is heavy. So I was born in New York, in Long Island, September 24, 1987, and a year later, my sister was born. After that, my parents decided we were gonna move to Arizona, where I did, and I developed a Southern draw, which is funny because now I speak Spanglish, but. And when I was 7 years old, my parents decided they were gonna take a break, and we were gonna move to the Dominican Republic because my dad is from the Dominican Republic. So we were gonna move there, my dad would move there a year later, and we did. And I'm 7 years old, and I'm young, but I'm aware enough that I grew up, I spoke English. My parents would speak to us in Spanish, but I didn't speak Spanish. And I remember feeling nervous, like I'm going to a Spanish-speaking country. I don't speak the language. I understand it, but I don't speak it. And on top of that, I'm leaving my dad behind, and I was always daddy's little girl. So that was really hard for me, just to leave my dad behind, move to this country. I didn't know anybody. My parents were like, you're going to an American-speaking school. Well, the reality was it was supposed to be an English-speaking school, but we were the only ones that really spoke English, so everyone else was learning to speak English. So that was hard. In an attempt for me to fit in, at 7 years old, I decided I was gonna nickname myself, and my name was gonna be Rosa. Rosa meaning rose. I'm 7 years old, and that just shows you like how aware I was and how much I just wanted to fit in. It didn't stick around for too long because I'm like, I'm not Rosa, that's just not me. But I adjusted, and eventually my dad moved, and it was fine, and everything was great. We ended up going to another school where eventually I would graduate from high school. I made friends, everything was good, but then 5th grade rolled in. It was coming towards the end of 4th grade, and my parents decided they were gonna split, and it was gonna be official. And that was really hard. You know, they were always fighting, there were always arguments. My sister and I would just like hide under the bed, just terrified. That's why I just don't. With arguments, it's just, it can be sometimes triggering for me. But my mom decided she had enough, and they were just gonna part ways, and that was it. So she decided we had to move. We had to move again. So I was transitioning into 5th grade, and my mom decided we're gonna move to Florida. Florida because my grandmother lived here, and she just needed to remove herself. We lived in this little island, the Dominican Republic, where everyone knows everyone, and my mom just needed time for healing. So we moved here. So I don't know if you remember what 5th grade was like for you, but for me, I was always the tall one. Like I remember in pictures trying to like hunch down, like how do I make myself smaller? Because I was always the tallest girl in the classroom. And always wanting to fit in. I just wanted to fit in. Friendly, super sweet girl, just wanting to fit in. And so I'm thinking about, I'm moving into, again, we're transitioning, I'm going to 5th grade, new school, new culture, new environment. On top of that, I'm having to mourn the loss of my parents coming, you know, like that separation. It was really hard for me. But it worked out. Like I figured my way out, you know, just as we all do when we're kids, and I managed, I made friends. It was uncomfortable, it was challenging, but I got through it. And then, you know, towards the end of 5th grade, our teachers are preparing us for middle school. And I remember our teachers, this is how they prepared us. I don't know about you, but like this was really a way to prepare their students. It was like, well, you know, as you go into middle school, just to prepare to be bullied. Like it's very common, but don't worry because everyone gets bullied because everyone goes through middle school, and like everybody goes through this experience in 6th grade. Way to really psych a student up who already has anxiety, right? I was mortified, I was terrified, and on top of that, the school that I was assigned to was like an F school, graded F, and I believe that they had, like, at least what they told us, they had regular bomb threats. I'm like, this is the school I'm going to, I'm gonna be bullied. My mom decided that's not the school that she's going to. We're going to move again. So we moved again. We moved to Weston, where I would go to Tequesta Middle School, and my sister was gonna go to another school, and again, it was hard because I had already made my roots. I established my friends. I was starting to grow into myself as an American, like living here, and then all of a sudden I have to start at a new school, anticipating to be bullied, and having to navigate this new school, this new environment, and just being in 6th grade. It was difficult, and to the point where I landed myself in the nurse's office multiple times, to the point where my mom was getting regular letters in the mail, like, what is going on? Why isn't Emmy showing up to class? You know, she comes and she leaves, she comes and she leaves. Is there anything that we should be aware of? I was just really having a hard time. I had stomach issues. I felt like I was gonna pass out. I didn't know what was going on with me, but it was hard. And my mom would just pick me up and I'd go back home. And I remember, you know, there were times where we would drop my sister off and Katie would just grab her backpack, slam the door, wave goodbye with this big, beautiful smile on her face. And I thought to myself, how is it so easy for her? Like, how is it so easy for her to transition, to make friends, to be okay? And for me, it was terrifying. You know, my mom went through a lot. And I totally skipped the part of witnessing my mother also go through depression. You know, she had been in this relationship for about 16, 17 years, and she was discovering who she was as a woman outside of marriage, because that had ended, as a single mother. So witnessing that, me having my anxiety, me having all these issues, and I didn't know what was going on with me. There was this one specific time that I remember she like opened the door and she's like, Emmy, you're going to school and you're gonna make it through the day and you're gonna do it like all the other students. And as I'm like trying to take my seatbelt off, all of a sudden I couldn't feel my arms, I couldn't feel my legs, and I started panicking. And I legitimately could not feel my legs, I couldn't feel my arms, I didn't know what was going on with me. My mom didn't know what was going on with me. And I look back and I think, that was the first time I had a panic attack. And that was the first of many panic attacks that would follow. That was like the tip of the iceberg of what eventually would unfold into a mental health disorder. I made it work. I somehow, slowly, I was able to make friends. And I made really good friends. I even got myself a boyfriend that I never spoke to because I was too shy, but we would send each other notes. So it worked out, you know, and then 6th grade is coming to an end, and I have my friends, I feel good, I feel like, okay, I've like established my identity here in this new school and developed my friends, and then my dad decides, well, I want my daughters to come back to the Dominican Republic. And, you know, on one side, I was excited because I got to be with my dad again, but on the other side, it's like, it took me so long to feel confident and to have friends and to feel comfortable living here, and now I have to go back. But we did. And the transition wasn't so bad because I went to school where I graduated in a class of about 23 students. So I knew everyone, I knew all the teachers, I was familiar with the campus, like I was good in that aspect. But my anxiety started to show itself in a different way. And this way it was, whenever it came to exams, I could never study enough. I was drinking coffee. I'd stay over at my friend's house and I'd be chugging coffee and just trying to learn and digest all the material to a point where I was taking tests and I was shaking, and my teachers would be like, what is going on with this girl? Let's send her to the nurse's office. You know, and it was too much caffeine and I was anxious, but I always wanted to be that A student. I always wanted to do good. And I was an A student, but it was never enough for me. You know, eventually I started modeling and I started filming and started doing regular commercials, and I became popular. And I remember thinking to myself, like, what is it that why does everyone want to be my friend? When inside I just felt so alone. I had no confidence, I had no self-esteem. And I remember, you know, it wasn't unusual for me to go through a day where I would think about what would life be if I didn't exist. And I had these thoughts regularly. I would daydream of like, you know, what if this happened to me? Or what if this happened to me? Would anybody ever care? And this was my mentality as a kid. But I navigated that. Once in a while I would speak to my counselor, but I didn't ever share these thoughts. I somehow came across journaling, and I would journal. And that was one of my outlets. I also lived close to the beach, so I would visit the beach regularly, and to me that was medicine. Then coming towards the end of high school, it was like, well, what am I doing? What am I doing for college? I didn't see myself in the Dominican Republic. All my friends, all my close friends were moving to New Jersey, Argentina, New York, and I felt like I grew up in this bubble. You know, my sister and I would visit Florida to see my grandmother every summer. And we would go on these shopping sprees, we'd go to the mall, and I remember I would see kids my age that would be like working at kiosk, working at the mall, or eating in the cafeteria by themselves, and I thought, damn, that's so admirable. Like, you would never catch me eating by myself. God forbid I would be eating by myself. Now I realize, like, I was just so uncomfortable with just being left alone with myself. Or even like just seeing them having and sustaining these jobs and like making their money, I just thought, wow, that's so amazing. You know, we didn't grow up we weren't rich, but we weren't poor. So I had a nanny, and we had someone who would drive us around. So these basic life skills, I didn't have that. And I would come here and I would see kids my age and I'd be like, I want that. So when it was time to make that decision of where I wanted to go, if I wanted to stay in the Dominican Republic, work for my dad and go under his company, or I can learn to be independent. And so I chose that route and I moved here. I moved with my grandmother. And it was a transition. It was difficult. The first couple months I wanted to go back and my dad was like, no, you made this decision, so you're staying here. And I'm grateful that he did. And so before you knew it, I had a job before I had a car, and then I had a car, and then I got myself into school, and I was full-time at school. I was full-time at work. I was doing really well. I was feeling confident. That's what I wanted, right? To have a job, to be self-sufficient, to help my grandmother out. And then a year later, my sister graduated high school, and then she moves. And then I took on the mother role because my mom was in Dominican Republic. So I'm like, okay, Katie, this is how I'm gonna get you into college. I filed all the financial aid applications. Like, wasn't my dad's signature, it was mine. But I supported my sister in transitioning into college and getting all the paperwork and writing up a resume and getting herself a job and buying her car. Like, I supported her in all of that. And again, I was feeling so good about myself. And then a year later, my mom moved, and it was the three of us all back together again, and we moved to Weston again. And it was great. And I got myself into, from BCC to Nova, where I started my bachelors in psychology, and my anxiety started to trickle in again. It was the performance. I was never doing enough. My papers were never enough. I remember there was one specific teacher. I turned in a paper, or she was giving me back the paper, one or the other, but I was an A student in that class. And she looked at me and she's like, Emmy, I don't understand, why isn't it ever enough? Like, your proof is right here. You're an A student. Why is it not enough? And I had lived my entire life up until then just like in not enoughness. It wasn't ever enough. After I finished my bachelor's in psychology, I realized like I didn't want to pursue psychology because I didn't want to have the conversations with my clients, and then after hearing all these stories, it was just like, for me, I wanted to be there with my client as they were facing their challenges. You know, I had already been to a couple of clinicians, and as beneficial and therapeutic as talk therapy can be, when I was going through it, my clinicians weren't there. Their voices were there, but they weren't there with me. So I decided, what do I want to, I want to do something where I can be there while they're going through it. So I decided to shadow a bunch of healthcare professionals until I came across occupational therapy, and I'm like, that's what I want to be. So I did all my credits, like all the courses that I had to do to transition into occupational therapy, and then I got in the program here at Nova. And thank God, because you know how you're supposed to do like a ton of credits to get into multiple schools? I only applied to one. And I'm grateful I got into this program. And so the first year, not even the first year, the first semester rolls through, and this was the first time ever that they offered a scholarship. And it was big because I knew I'm gonna have to get loans for this, but it's okay, I'll pay it off. So they provide us with this information. There's this email that goes out, and it's like there's an opportunity to get the Chancellor's Scholarship. I think our classroom was about 62 students. Only 2 would get it. And out of the 2, I was one of them. I got it. I landed myself the scholarship, and I knew it was for me. I got it. But then here we go again. Like, can you imagine? I was never enough, right? When I would turn in my works, I would do my presentations. So here I just put this burden on myself. It was a blessing, but at the same time, I felt that weight of like, I need to be my best because out of 62 students, I'm one of the ones that got this scholarship. So I have to do even better now. And that's where my anxiety really started to show its nasty face. You know, not only was it, I began to realize, and eventually I was diagnosed with performance anxiety, with social anxiety, and with depression. And as you look back, and if you were listening to my stories, that was the entire trajectory of my life up until then. Going to school, meeting new people, that was terrifying for me. and the suicidal ideation from a little girl. That was just this underlining thread. And it got really intense to the point where when I was sitting in class, I would strategically position myself close to the door because I was too afraid that I would have a panic attack and that people would see me because I was so ashamed. It came to the point where I called my dad. My dad was living in Dominican Republic, and I asked my dad, Papi, I need you to come visit. I need to have a talk with you. And I sat my grandmother and my mom, my father down, and I told them, like, I'm struggling. I don't want to live. And I was having these thoughts on a regular basis. I was really having a hard time. It was every single day. It was just like I was a punching bag towards myself. I hated myself. I didn't understand why I couldn't be normal like everybody else. Why can't I just have friends? You know, I was very strategic in the things that I did in the social outings. I would go out to the events where there was music and we had to dance. I would do that because I could dance and I could be loud and I could be fun. But when it came to sitting down and like talking, having a conversation and being raw and honest, like that was hard. That was really hard for me. It didn't come easy. And you know, as I slowly started opening up to a couple people, I started realizing like there were so many students in our program that were dealing with the same. They were dealing with anxiety. I mean, graduate school is intense. You know, they tell me like, do you want to go back to school? No, I do not. I'm very clear, no, I'm done. But there were so many students that were on antidepressants during that time, which really sucks to hear that there's a lot of students out there that are struggling. And so many students that were on medication. And so I decided, I mean, I had fought against, I just didn't want to go that route. I had multiple therapists and multiple doctors try to get me on medicine, and I just didn't want to. And so eventually I just had enough, and I'm like, I just have this last chunk, like we had my last clinical rotation, let me just get through this and go on medication. And so I did. I went and I sat with the clinical psychiatrist who had just met me, and I sat with him for about 15 minutes, and you know, 15 minutes later I walk out with my prescription. And I started my medication, and a couple days after starting, maybe not even a week, I don't think it was a week, I was preparing for a presentation. Again, remembering like how nervous that would make me just to present. My voice would crack, I would sound like I was crying, like it was an experience for everyone, myself and everyone who had to hear me go through it. It was torture. So I'm sitting here and I'm trying to go over like what I'm going to say as I'm presenting, not just with myself, but I'm presenting with peers, and I want it to be perfect because it impacts their grade as well. And I read the first sentence and I don't understand what I just read. And so I read it again and I don't understand what I just read. Like, what did I just read? And I read it one more time, and then I just decide, that, what's the point? What's the point? Like, I don't want to be here, I'm done. And that was my mentality, and that was my reaction. You know, you hear these commercials on, you know, being on an antidepressant might increase your rate of this and that and this and like suicide. But unfortunately, like I didn't have a clinical psychiatrist who really took his time to share, you know, you can become very impulsive. You can maybe not have some problems like processing some information. You should probably tell someone that you're on medication just to monitor you and to check in with you. But he didn't do that. And so I just decided at that moment that I was done. And I had access to a weapon. I had access to a gun. And it wasn't at my house. It was at a friend's house who I knew the code to enter. And so I ended up going to his house. He wasn't there. And I grabbed the gun. And before I was going to do anything, I just noticed like there was this bottle of rum that was sitting on the counter. I'm like, I'm just going to have this shot. And back then I didn't drink much. I didn't drink. But to top it off, like I'm on medication, so I don't know how it's going to react. And I'm grateful that I had that shot, because I think that's what saved me. Because the next thing you know, I was on the 3rd floor, And from the 3rd floor, I ended on the 1st floor with my phone totally shattered, and I was being taken away in an ambulance. I was being Baker acted. I ended up in this hospital with a woman who was, like in the movies, in the corner looking out at the window. There was a tech that was responsible to make sure that she didn't hurt herself or didn't hurt me. And she was just rocking, and she was looking out the window, and she was just singing 사랑합니다, 사랑합니다. Don't ask me how I know that. It's so weird, but it's Korean for I love you. And so I asked her, who are you singing I love you to? And she came over and she sat down with me. And the tech was just like, are you okay? And I felt safe. I think by then I was just like so checked out and she started telling me her story. And it was at that moment where I thought, like, why am I here? How am I here? How am I here listening to this woman and all the issues and all the things that she's going through? And I'm here because I'm worried about how I'm being perceived. I'm here because I'm nervous of going to a social gathering and just meeting people that I don't know, or having some conversations, or having the perfect grades. Like, this is stupid. And that was one of the darkest times of my life. And it was hard. Some people know how to approach a person that's going through some emotional issues. My sister didn't. So it was, I believe, from a Thursday to Sunday, I ended up missing my friend's wedding in the Keys because I was in this hospital in an inpatient setting with people who were having regular hallucinations and screaming, bipolar, like schizophrenic, and a good chunk of this population was homeless. My sister would not visit me. She wouldn't talk to me. And that was really hard for me. Now I look back and I'm able to say, like, I took it personal back then, but now I realize she just didn't know how to handle that. And she probably even thought it was very selfish of me, which now I do, like how I wanted to take my life because it was so painful. She probably saw that as selfish. Now I look back and it's like, well, clearly I didn't think about my mom. I didn't think about my siblings. I didn't think about my dad, who's going to take care of my grandmother. I didn't think about that thing, like of any of that. I was just so focused on just not feeling any pain. So it was a hard time, but as I'm in there, I'm seeing these people who are significantly depressed to the point where they wouldn't leave their rooms. They would just, if they had to use the bathroom, they would do it while they were in their bed or in their clothing because getting up to go to the bathroom was too much. And that hurt to see that. I mean, I was depressed, but these people were really struggling. And so the next thing you know, I'm like trying to gather the people. And I'm sitting them at this table. I'm like, let's play cards. And I think it's so funny because I'm here in this program, Occupational Therapy. Our roots of occupational therapy, where OT started, was engaging veterans to reintegrate into the community through meaningful occupations. Here I am doubting myself as an occupational therapist. I don't think I'm good enough. And I'm gathering all these people. Let's play cards, guys, It was tough. Eventually I was released and I have this conversation with my mom and I had 1 semester left of school and I decided I was done. I just couldn't. How am I gonna be a therapist if I don't believe in myself? So I walked over to the dean's office and sat down with her, sat down with my mom, and I just decided, like, I can't do this. How am I gonna be a therapist if I don't even believe in myself? And I'm just so grateful that they were the incredible occupational therapists and leaders and earth angels to me, because instead of allowing me to just leave and to end it, they're like, no, you're gonna come to school and you don't have to do any of the presentations, you don't have to do any of the assignments, you're just gonna come to school and leave, and if you wanna do an assignment or two, you can do it, but you have no obligation, and then you'll take it when you feel comfortable. Next school year, you could do it again, and you could do it with the other class, but you're gonna walk with your class. I was at the finish line, and I was gonna graduate with my class. OTs because they kept me engaged, because they probably knew that if I'd go home, I'd go back to myself and my thoughts. So they kept me in the program, and two of them were supposed to be here. One's traveling to Europe, and the other one was going to be here last Friday, but she couldn't because she has an AOTA, an Occupational Therapy convention, so she's not here. But these women, I call them my earth angels because they believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. They called me regularly. They would make sure I was okay. And they were just my professors. They weren't there just to get me through the program. They genuinely cared. So, eventually I get out and I decide I want to start changing my life. I want to do something different for myself. I need to shift this conversation. I'm sick of just being my own punching bag. I see everyone living a good life and happy and smiling and laughing when they're in these social scenarios, and to me it was so challenging, but I want that, and I deserve that. So I started going to therapy on a regular basis, and I came across, I'd been working with Dr. Marla Reese for some time, but I started working with her consistently, and she was like, Emmy, I want you to try acupuncture. And Emmy, I want you to try yoga, and I want you to try Reiki. And whatever she said, I trusted her. I wanted to do that because she was the first therapist. It was like, no to medicine. We already tried that. Let's see what other modalities are going to support you in your day-to-day. Holistically, doesn't have to be through medication. And so I got myself into regular sessions with acupuncture, and then I started doing yoga. And it was when I came to yoga, after I finished a class, I remember an hour later, I just realized as I'm laying there in Shavasana, thinking to myself, wow, I wasn't in my thoughts at all. I was so connected to my body. I was so connected to my breath. And it meant so much because I had these regular, self-limiting, awful thoughts. And for 60 minutes, I didn't have those thoughts. I was able to connect to my breath and connect to my body, and I saw a possibility. And so I continued my practice, and I started realizing that when I would present in these presentations, these class presentations that were so anxiety-inducing for me, I was able to get up and have a conversation, and you could actually understand me. It wasn't torture for me or the class. And I remember realizing, oh my gosh, I just got through that whole presentation. How did I do that? Well, it's because I focused on my breath, and I was able to calm myself down. And where did I learn that? The pill didn't help me do that. That was yoga. That was breath work. And so I started doing Reiki as well. I had my first Reiki experience, and it was, life-changing. I saw things, I felt things, I heard things that there's no way to describe I couldn't explain what I had just experienced, because it's a person who's just placing her hands, and all of a sudden I'm seeing things and I'm feeling things and I'm hearing things. And I don't know what it is, but I want more of that because it felt like this warm hug. And not long after, I ended up, actually a couple years later, I became a Reiki practitioner, but it was because of that experience. It gave me hope. I don't understand this. I don't know how to explain this, but it gave me hope. And it's shifted me. The more I did yoga, the more I had Reiki sessions, the more I did acupuncture, the better I was. I was just starting to shift. I was noticing what benefited me, what served me, what wasn't serving me. I was even in a relationship at a time where we were totally opposites. I was into health and wellness, and he was into, not a bad guy, but into drinking and gambling. And I'm like, this isn't serving me. And so slowly I started leaving relationships and doing things that were really therapeutic and nourishing to my soul. I dove deep into personal development. Has anybody read Jennifer Sincero, You Are a Badass? There's a part in the book at the beginning that she goes over, she talks about, doing courses, these personal development courses where you're beating a pillow and you're screaming at the top of your lungs. I remember reading it and I just busted out laughing out loud. I'm like, yep, I know exactly what that is. And so I did a training, and it was a great training, and it was life like transforming for me. And it was all about getting outside of your comfort zone, like really stretching yourself, really going for things that made you feel uncomfortable. Not many people know this story, but it was another life-changing experience for me. So I'm in the third program, in the third trial, what would you call it? There's like different levels. So I'm in the third level, right? I mean, I've already grown exponentially. But I remember sitting at the front, because I was front and center, sitting at the edge of my seat, like trying to learn. And the presenter is going over like the dares. These are the things that you're gonna, like, you can do it, and it's really gonna challenge you. But you know what is going to challenge you. And so the first one he mentioned, and I busted out laughing. And I'm like, what? And he looks at me, he's like, well, Emmy, we know which one you're doing. And I thought to myself, there's no way. And then I sat with it, and I'm like, I invested in this program. And if I'm going to do this, and if I really am adamant about changing this conversation in my head and changing the way that I'm living my life and shifting my way and loving myself, then I'm going to do it. So the dare was the challenge was to go to a restaurant and to feed my partner food and to get engaged to this person, okay? Now the catch was, he was invisible. Yeah, I had that same reaction. He was invisible. And so the night before, I'm thinking, like, I don't have to do this one, I can do another one like that. But I knew that I had to do it. And so I know it sounded fucking insane. And so I didn't sleep at all that night. I'm just like, I'm gonna pass out. Like all those feelings I had in 6th grade starting school, I'm gonna pass out, I can't breathe, I can't think, I can't feel my legs, I can't feel my arms. All of those things, I like felt that all over again. And then I show up and I'm dressed up and I remember exactly what I wore, and I go up, and luckily I have a buddy there who's supposed to hold me accountable, but he's not sitting with me, he's sitting on the other side of the room. And so I sit down and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this. All right, I'd like to order a meal for myself and for my partner. And the woman's like, oh, is he arriving soon? I'm like, no, he's right there. Yeah, right there. So I order him a meal, and I'm just like feeding him. I decide to feed, and I'm looking at my partner. My heart is beating the top, like I feel my heart right here. And then all of a sudden, this is at First Watch, by the way, somewhere in Deerfield, I believe. And there's like a swinging door, and I see like the bus boys behind, and they're like pointing towards me, laughing. And then there's the waiters that are pointing, and there's people that are like, pointing and laughing. And in that moment, something took over, because all of a sudden, it wasn't about them. In that moment, it was about me fighting my fears of saying, I'm sorry, F you, to my fears. Like, this might be scary, and this might be so out of my comfort zone, but I am so done and over living my life too worried about what other people think about me or how they see me. I don't care. I want to do this for myself and for all the people that are living in fear. And as I'm feeding my partner gladly, I'm just like, I'm doing this for my brother. I'm doing this for my sister. I'm doing this for my mother who's living in fear. I'm doing this for my dad. I'm doing this. Started naming, softly, but I'm like naming the reason why I'm doing it. And then I get engaged. And then like there's a hug and people applaud me, and I'm like, when I left, I found out, like I got engaged and then I left. And then when I left, we're in the car, and my buddy is telling me, Emmy, they almost called the cops on you. They didn't know how to handle me, and he got up, and he was a veteran, so he's like, man, this is not how you handle this situation. She's just probably having a psychotic break. Just let her, she's gonna go. She's not disturbing anybody. But can you imagine? And I'm so grateful. I mean, till this day, I still go on Instagram. Like, Instagram was around, but it wasn't as like popular. and Facebook, and I go on YouTube, like, lady gets married to invisible man at first while, like, hoping that I don't see myself on social media because it's insane. But like that just shows you the strength that I pulled out of me to fight for myself, to fight for my life, and going from unworthiness to like, I am so worthy of this and so much more. And so I started to shift my life, and I started stretching myself. 10 years ago, I wouldn't be able to do this. There is no way. I wouldn't, and if I did do it, like, there's no way that I would be able to get a good night's sleep. I had the best night's sleep with a smile on my face, knowing like, I get to do this for myself. This is my first time sharing all of this, including, being married or engaged to this invisible man. But that's just a testimony of like, I shared a story of this little girl who was very insecure. And I spent my entire life, for a good chunk of my life, up until I was 26, 27 years old, hating myself. I didn't want to live. I didn't want to live. I didn't want to be here. I didn't think I was worthy. I'm too stupid. I don't look pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not this enough. Like, fill in the blank. I just wasn't enough in any area of my life. And then I decided I was going to shift that around, and I really submerged myself into these practices, and I got myself all my mentors. I supported myself with friends that I knew wanted to see me succeed, because the reality is there are a lot of people that live in fear. There are so many people that live in fear, and that's not where I want to live. So I can be, friends with these people, and I still have friends and family that they are living in fear, and they don't go for things that they want to do because it's scary. I know how scary it can be, but I don't want to live there anymore. I want to live for me. And so that is why I do what I do. That is why I bring the yoga. That is why I bring the meditation, the mindfulness, the breath work, the sound healing, all of the things, like all these modalities, bringing in experiences that I also gain through my own experiences. I bring that to my offerings because I know how therapeutic that is. Because it's not about getting into a handstand or doing this amazing yoga pose. It's so much more than that. It's learning how to drop out of this mind that sometimes can take you down these rabbit holes, or doesn't give you an opportunity to take a moment to pause and realize, are these thoughts serving me, or are these people serving me, or is this job serving me, or is this food serving me? To really allow ourselves to drop out of our minds, into our hearts, into our bodies, and become the authors of our lives. To really live life consciously and with intention. So that's how the Mindful OT was born. And that's how Yo.T was born. Yo.T stands for Yoga and Occupational Therapy. And coming full circle, in 2017, I was asked to start teaching a class out in Plantation that I took over, and I started with 16 students, and then all of a sudden it blew up to 75 students that were showing up with their families. And then I had Dr. Marla Reese reach out to me and say, I want you to start working with some clients she had this intensive outpatient program for young adolescents with anxiety and depression and OCD. And so I started bringing in the yoga. And then as I started bringing in the yoga, I realized this is OT. This is OT. How do you deal with depression? Getting them engaged, discovering what are my hobbies, what are my interests, reconnecting them to their body, becoming aware of what their habits, what their roles, what their routines are. So I brought in the occupational therapy. And so that's how everything was born. That is my story. That's why I do what I do, and I do it wholeheartedly because I believe in it, because I'm a testimony. The fact that I'm sitting here, I'm not hyperventilating, my voice is clear, just shows you that these things work. So, that being said, before I end, I would love to guide you guys in an experience, if you're open to it. So the experience is everybody comes here and talk. No, I'm just kidding. That's not the experience. But I'm going to invite you to, let me put this on, nose, and a deep breath out. And slowly start to just draw awareness to your breath. Notice where you feel the breath. Do you feel it in the shoulders? Do you feel it in the chest? And not trying to manipulate the breath, not trying to adjust the breath, just notice where you feel it. And now starting to become intentional with the breath as you fill up your upper body, your middle body, your belly expands. And exhale, letting the breath go, noticing how the belly draws in towards the spine. You soften the shoulders, allow your body to feel super heavy and supported by the surface beneath you. And taking another deep breath in through the nose. And a deep breath out. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. We'll do that one more time. This time I want you to take a deep breath in, hold it at the top, and bring your shoulders towards the ears. Feel that tension within the shoulders and the tightness. And then audible exhale, let the breath go, relax the shoulders. And so we'll start to draw into this count breath as we continue to anchor into this moment. So fully exhaling the breath, and then we'll take an in breath for a count of 2. 1, and then exhale for 2. 1, hold the breath for 2. 1, inhale for 2. Exhale for 2. Hold the breath for 2. Inhaling for a count of 3. 2. 1, exhale 3. 2. 1, hold the breath for 3. 2. 1 more round. Inhale for 3. Exhale for 3. Hold the breath for 3. Coming back to count of 2. 1, exhale 2. 1, hold. 1 more round. Inhale for 2. Exhale for 2. Hold the breath for 2. Inhale for a count of 1. Exhale for 1. Hold the breath for 1. Good, and then slowly come back to your natural breath in and out through the nose, keeping the eyes closed. I want you to visualize the same cloud that I would visualize in graduate school as I had these feelings. So visualizing this beautiful mist of air, the color lime green. And as you take your inhales, can you visualize that breath going in through your nose and just sending it back on the exhale to your heart space? Filling yourself up with love and gratitude and compassion. So taking these deep intentional breaths in through the nose, sipping in this sweet mist of air and sending that to your heart space. Connecting to this beautiful space within you that allows you to connect to you and to others on a deep, deep level. Just taking a few more rounds here. Deep breath in through the nose. Deep breath out. Now, as you continue to send the breath to your heart, can you shift your focus? And can you go back in time to a time in your life that was challenging? A time when you once questioned if you were going to get out on the other side. A time that was really hard, and yet you did what you could, and you took one step, and then another step, and then another step. And you kept doing what you had to do because something inside of you told you that you were worthy of more? Can you think of that moment you made it out? Did you, or have you even taken the time to honor yourself for all your growth that you've made in this lifetime? Recognizing that life isn't always easy and that there are going to be moments that will test you. Can you recognize or remember that you get to be your biggest cheerleader and your biggest love? How can you learn to lead your life from a place of compassion and of softness? Slowly bringing one hand to your heart, and then the other hand to rest right on top as you connect to this beautiful space within you. Take another deep breath in through the nose. Audible exhale, let the breath go. Now, keeping your eyes closed, just take a moment to witness yourself here. Sitting in your chair, grounding in your breath, and surrounded by a community of professionals that are here to be inspired, to get connected, and to grow. Witness yourself at this moment in time attending to you, nourishing your mind, your soul through these simple acts of self-care and love by choosing to carve time out of your day to take care of you, to fill yourself up with inspiration and connect with a pretty incredible community. It's when we choose to put ourselves first and show up for ourselves that we can truly show up as the best and brightest version and then share from that space. From a place where you feel fulfilled, where you're able to share your light and your gifts with your partner, with your children, with your family, with your friends, with your community. Take another deep breath in through the nose. Audible exhale, let it go. It has been such an honor spending my morning with all of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my story. Namaste.